honestly. You're so fucking vain.
I know.
I don't know how I deal with your vanity all the time.
I'm like the most vain, least vain person.
Most vain, least vain. How does that work? Talk to me about it. Explain your reasoning.
So like I won't cut my hair, I won't shave. I actually have like not the greatest hygiene habits.
Tell me about your hygiene habits. What are not great about them?
Like I don't brush my teeth every day.
Okay.
Like if I brush my teeth every other day, I'm doing good.
You should brush your teeth twice a day.
Yeah.
And I'm not, listen, my teeth are so fucked right now.
No, I know.
And it's kind of the reason where I really would like a job so that I can get dental insurance again. So that I can go to the dentist and have like 2 teeth pulled.
Listen, as someone with a broken tooth in their mouth right now, I feel I
got 2. I got 2 broken teeth.
2?
Actually, I got one which this filling came out, which was a pretty big fucking filling.
So you just have an open tooth.
I have a big fucking drilled out opening in it, and I can feel it slowly degrading.
Yep.
And then I have a broken crown.
I have like my tooth broken half,
and I'm missing a tooth as well.
I'm missing this one. Already got taken out. I had one that I cracked and swallowed half of it.
Yeah.
Taken out when I had my wisdom teeth done.
Yeah.
At 30.
Yeah.
And then,
I didn't get my wisdom teeth done until I was like 25. So
dude, it was like I just waited so long because I was scared, but they needed to come out.
Yeah, like, dude, getting my wisdom teeth out was dope. I fucking
really.
Yeah, dude, I popped Vicodin and ate popsicles for like a week.
See, I got 2 dry sockets.
Oh, yeah.
And
you're a bitch.
Was in misery for 3 weeks eating Vicodin and smoking so much weed.
You got those weak ass fucking sockets.
I got these pussy sockets.
Fucking pussy ass
little
sockets.
Bitch ass sockets.
Fucking always getting dried out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got wet sockets, bro.
I mean,
my sockets are dripping.
Obviously you're a father.
Fucking dripping, bro.
That's why you're a dad.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. So hello. Welcome back to Drunken Stories on Meat Sweats.
Is that what it's called now?
I don't know.
We just fucking change the name whenever we want to?
It's still Meat Sweats. It's under the Meat Sweats banner.
Yeah, Meat Sweats. Meat Sweats, the book reading.
Yeah, the readings.
Yeah. So I'm going to read something this week. It's by Patrick Rothfuss. It's called The Name of the Wind. It's book 1 of the King Killer Chronicles, I think is the name of the series. Yeah. So the King Killer Chronicle Day 1.
I'm all about killing kings.
This is one of the best fantasy series I've ever read. The 3rd book is not out yet. People keep asking when he's going to finish it.
Does he keep giving them George R.R. Martin-esque answers?
When
I die.
What happened is this got so popular, like he's done like a bunch of other shit during that time. He did a really cool...
Because he needed to make money?
Yeah, I mean, once you get to where people desire your services, like I guess you would get a little more busy. But I think this is being adapted into a TV show or a book a movie, and then I think...
that's what kills these book series, though. Don't you? Like, so Game of Thrones started coming... Like, the Game of Thrones books,
right.
Fire and Ice books, started coming out in... 93 or something like that. Like
I don't remember, but I do remember.
Or 96.
I remember like after the 2nd book, I like got the 3rd book when it came out. Like
he was going on like a 2-year turnaround on his book series where he was cranking out his series.
Yeah, and
then HBO show happens, and he published the Dance with the Dragons. In I want to say 2017 or 2018.
No, it's got to be
2015.
Yeah,
and then
it's been
just
forever.
nothing since.
Yeah, it's been real disappointing.
It's very disappointing.
I'm like one of my biggest. But then he has
time to fucking do Fire and Blood.
One of my biggest like guilty. One of the biggest guilty pleasures is long fantasy series.
Yeah.
Like I've read several long fantasy series. I'm still like in the process of reading some, waiting for more books to come out. Mm-hmm. So this is another one that like I came across, and it's only 2 books right now, but It's one of the best stories I've ever read.
That's one thing I really loved about reading the Witcher series.
Yeah, I haven't read those at all.
Is because he finished it.
Yeah. So, like, I was telling you about the Wheel of Time earlier.
Yeah.
And the Wheel of Time is something like I started reading the Wheel of Time when I was a teenager and picked it up when it was like book 6. Like when book 6 was released
is when you started reading.
Is when I started reading all of them and caught up, and then was catching up with the books as they came out. And then he died.
Oh shit!
He died with like 4 books left. And what happened is his wife went to Brandon Sanderson, who is a very prolific fantasy sci-fi writer now. At the time, he'd written a couple books and then a series called Mistborn, which is fucking great. I love Brandon Sanderson, and I wouldn't have ever gone and read his shit had he not been tapped to go into the notes, because Jordan's wife was very involved in his writing, and all the notes were meticulously kept, and he had it basically all written out of like, this is the way the series ends. Like, this is everything that happens. This is the way it goes. And they brought in Sanderson to finish it, and he did a fucking tremendous job. And it's one of the greatest things, but it's 14 books that are like 1,500 pages.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's brutal, but like, it's so fucking good.
That's like Dune. Dune's not that long though, is it?
I don't know. See, I've never read Dune. I've picked up the movie Dune, or not the movie, the first book Dune.
Yeah.
A couple times and started reading it. I was pretty young at the time, so like maybe if I read it now, like it would mean more. But
yeah. I've never pushed through. I've seen the Dune movie, obviously, but I've never.
I don't think I've even
attempted.
I don't think I've even seen the movie. I think I remember parts of it.
I remember like having nightmares about the giant sandworms from Dune.
You know they're redoing the movie right now.
I've heard that. Yeah. It's supposed to. I hope it's dope.
I think like Josh Brolin's in it.
Love me some Josh Brolin.
God damn, I love Josh Brolin.
Oh, fuck that guy.
And I don't know if you follow his Instagram.
Nope. Because I'd probably want to fuck him even more.
Yeah, he's like this total cowboy, but like he grew up.
Of course he is.
He grew up like in a fucking Joe Exotic fucking like zoo.
Get out of here.
Like his parents like had like, yeah, he's got pictures of him when he was a kid with like fucking tigers and shit. And like when Joe Exotic came out, there was a long post with a bunch of pictures of him as like a kid and getting older and stuff.
And there's him and Josh Brolin hanging out.
Not Joe Exotic, but him with like all these animals. Like it wasn't actually Joe Exotic, but a Joe Exotic type place.
Yeah.
Where his parents were these.
Did his dad have a harem like the other guy in that?
I don't think he doesn't really go into it, but he was kind of like, hey, this is the way I grew up, and
that's so fucking weird,
isn't it? It's dude, you just. Go on Josh Brolin's Instagram later and go back, a couple months, and you'll see some crazy shit and read it, because he's a very like cowboy hippie dude.
That's fun.
Yeah, he seems like a pretty cool dude. I'd like to know him someday.
What's with these actors and just like crazy weird history backstories? Like, Woody Harrelson, his dad was a convicted hitman.
Yeah. I've heard that.
Shit like that,
I think because here's honestly the same reason like comics have the backgrounds, artists in general.
Yeah, just broken.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's how you learn to like change who you are.
Yeah.
Like me growing up, like I had to be a fucking chameleon, dude. Like I had to be different people around different people in order to just be safe.
To survive.
It's like a survival mechanism as a kid, whereas like an adult, it's like, oh, I can use this to entertain people.
Yeah.
And that's what you learn to do, like to be safe, is like, that's how I learned to be funny. And that's how I learned to be like social. I'm not a social person.
Me neither.
But the way I can be social is just by being a silly jackass and making people laugh.
The pandemic has really shown me just how not social of a human being I am.
Yeah.
Because, like, honestly, I feel fine. Just hanging out
at
home.
You're fucked up, Bill.
I know.
You're fucked up. You've got a problem. You need to see someone.
I know.
Prologue. This is
Prologue?
Yeah, the prologue is just it's a page and a half.
Thank you.
Fuck you. You fucking uneducated piece of shit. Don't correct my pronunciation.
So educated.
Patrick Rothfuss, The Name of the Wind. Prologue. a silence of 3 parts. It was night again. The Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was a silence of 3 parts. The most obvious part was a hollow, echoing quiet made by things that were lacking. If there had been a wind, it would have sighed through the trees, set the inn signs creaking on its hooks, and brushed the silence down the road like trailing autumn leaves. If there had been a crowd, even a handful of men inside the inn, they would have filled the silence with conversation and laughter, the clatter and clamor one expects from a drinking house during the dark hours of night. If there had been music, but no. Of course there was no music. In fact, there were none of these things, and so the silence remained. Inside the Waystone, a pair of men huddled at one corner of the bar. They drank with quiet determination, avoiding serious discussions of troubling news. In doing this, they added a small, sullen silence to the larger, hollow one. It made an alloy of sorts, a counterpoint. The third silence was not an easy thing to notice. If you listened for an hour, you might begin to feel it in the wooden floor underfoot and in the rough, splintering barrels behind the bar. It was in the weight of the black stone hearth that held the heat of a long-dead fire. It was in the slow back and forth of a white linen cloth rubbing along the grain of the bar. And it was in the hands of the man who stood there, polishing a stretch of mahogany that already gleamed in the lamplight. The man had true red hair, red as flame. His eyes were dark and distant, and he moved with a subtle certainty that comes from knowing many things. The Waystone was his, just as the third silence was his. This was appropriate, as it was the greatest silence of the 3, wrapping the others inside itself. It was deep and wide as autumn's ending. It was heavy as a great river's smooth stone. It was the patient, cut-flower sound of a man who is waiting to die. Chapter 1. A Place for Demons. It was...
Like, fucking... silence, and then demons. Just demons, right away.
Yeah, that's how you set a scene, bro.
That is setting a scene.
That's how you
very
set
quiet
a fucking
place,
scene.
And then big old demon finger in your butt. I love it.
Are you ready for me to continue?
I'm ready.
Okay.
You read way better than I do.
Chapter 1.
He's
A Place for Demons. It was felling night, and the usual crowd had gathered at the Waystone Inn. 5 wasn't much of a crowd, but 5 was as many as the Waystone ever saw these days, times being what they were. Old Cobb was filling his role as storyteller and advice dispensary. The man at the bar sipped their drinks and listened. In the back room, a young innkeeper stood out of sight behind the door, smiling as he listened to the details of a familiar story.
Yes.
Ooh, that was bubbly at the end. That's that pineapple, baby.
Pineapple.
When he awoke, Taborlin the Great found himself locked in a high tower.
Hold on. If you drink too much Mr. Pineapple, is it like eating too much pineapple? It makes your cum taste like pineapple?
I don't taste my cum.
You should.
Stop it. Stop it. Don't ruin my story with your gayness. This is a real not gay story, bro.
Bro, roll up. Come on, just roll up in a ball. Okay.
When he awoke, Taborlin the Great found himself locked in a high tower. They had taken his sword and stripped him of his tools. Key, coin, and candle were all gone. But that weren't even the worst of it, you see. Cobb paused for effect, 'cause the lamps on the wall were burning blue. Graham, Jake, and Shep nodded to themselves. The 3 friends had grown up together, listening to Cobb's stories and ignoring his advice. Cobb peered closely at the newer, more attentive member of his small audience, the smith's apprentice. Do you know what that meant, boy? Everyone called the smith's apprentice boy, despite the fact that he was a hand taller than anyone else there. Small towns being what they are, he would most likely remain boy until his beard filled out, or he bloodied someone's nose over the matter.
Racists.
Right? I mean, they didn't say he was black, but it sounds like by his
Racists.
height, perhaps he was, and they shouldn't be saying that. The boy gave a slow nod. The Chandrian. That's right, Cobb said approvingly. The Chandrian. Everyone knows that blue fire is one of their signs. Now he was... But how'd they find him, the boy interrupted. And why didn't they kill him when they had the chance? Hush now. You'll get all the answers before the end, Jake said. Just let them tell it. No need for all that, Jake, Graham said. Boy's just curious. Drink your drink. I drank me drink already, Jake grumbled. I need another, but the innkeeper's skills skinning rats in the back room. He raised his voice and knocked his empty mug hollowly on the top of the mahogany bar. Oi! We're thirsty men in there. The innkeeper appeared with 5 bowls of stew and 2 warm, round loaves of bread. He pulled more beer for Jake, Shep, and Old Cobb, moving with an air of bustling efficiency. The story was set aside while the men tended to their dinners. Old Cobb tucked away his bowl of stew with the predatory efficiency of a lifetime bachelor. The others were still blowing steam off their bowls when he finished the last of his loaf and returned to his story. Now Tamerlane needed to escape, but when he looked around, he saw a cell and no door, no windows. All around him was nothing but smooth, hard stone. It was a cell no man had ever escaped. But Tamerlane knew the names of all things, and so all things were his to command. He said to the stone, break, and the stone broke. The wall tore like a piece of paper, and through that hole Tamerlane could see the sky and breathe the sweet spring air. He stepped to the edge, looked down, and without a second thought he stepped out into the open air. The boy's eyes went wide. He didn't. Cobb nodded seriously. So Tamerlane fell, but he did not despair, for he knew the name of the wind, and so the wind obeyed him. He spoke to the wind, and it cradled and caressed him. It bore him to the ground as gently as a puff of thistledown, and set him on his feet softly as a mother's kiss. And when he got to the ground and felt his side where they stabbed him, he saw that it weren't hardly a scratch. Now maybe it was just a piece of luck. Cobb tapped the side of his nose knowingly. Or maybe it had something to do with the amulet he was wearing under his shirt. What amulet? The boy asked eagerly through a mouthful of stew. Old Cobb leaned back on the stool, glad for the chance to elaborate. A few days earlier, Tamerlane had met a tinker on the road, and even though Tamerlane didn't have much to eat, he shared his dinner with the old man. Right sensible thing to do, Graham said quietly to the boy. Everyone knows, a tinker pays for kindness twice. No, Jake grumbled. Get it right. A tinker's advice pays kindness twice. The innkeeper spoke up for the first time that night. Actually, you're missing more than half, he said, standing in the doorway behind the bar. A tinker's debt is always paid, once for any simple trade, twice for freely given aid, thrice for any insult made. The men at the bar seemed almost surprised to see Coat standing there. They'd been coming to the Waystone every felling night for months, and Coat had never interjected anything of his own before. Not that you would expect anything else, really. He'd only been in town for a year or so. He was still a stranger. The smith's apprentice had lived here since he was 11, and he was still referred to as that Ranish boy, as if Ranish were some foreign country and not a town less than 30 miles away. Right?
Racist.
Fucking racist. Fucking townsists.
Fucking townies.
Fucking townies.
Shitty townies. Ugh, don't be a shitty townie, kids.
Just something I heard once, Coat said to fill the silence, obviously embarrassed. Old Cobb nodded before he cleared his throat and launched back into the story. Now, this amulet was worth a whole bucket of gold royals, but on account of Tamerlane's kindness, the tinker sold it to him for nothing but an iron penny, a copper penny, and a silver penny. It was black as a winter night and cold as ice to touch, but so long as it was round his neck, Tamerlane would be safe from the harm of evil things, demons and such. I'd give a good piece for such a thing these days, Shep said darkly. He had drunk most and talked least over the course of the evening. Everyone knew that something bad had happened out at his farm last sindling night, but since there was good friends, they knew better than to press him for the details. At least not this early in the evening, not as sober as they were. Aye, who wouldn't, Old Cobb said judiciously, taking a long drink. I didn't know the Chandrian were demons, the boy said. I'd heard. They ain't demons, Jake said firmly. They were the first 6 people to refuse Telu's choice of the path, and he cursed them to wander the corners. Are you telling the story, Jacob Walker? Cobb said sharply. 'Cause if you are, I'll just let you get on with it.
That's why you like this book. main character's Jacob Walker.
That's not the main character at all. Shut your fucking mouth. Let me teach you something right now. Cobb turned back to the boy. That's the mystery of the Chandrian, he explained. Where do they come from? Where do they go after they've done their bloody deeds? Are they men who sold their souls? Demons? Spirits? No one knows. Cobb shot Jake a profoundly disdainful look, though every Hatwit claims he knows. The story fell further into bickering at this point about the nature of the Chandrian, the signs that showed their presence to the wary, and whether the amulet would protect Taborlin from bandits or mad dogs or falling off a horse. Things were getting heated when the front door banged open. Jake looked over. It's about time you got in, Carter. Tell this damn fool the difference between a demon and a dog. Everybody know. Jake stopped mid-sentence and rushed to the door. God's body, what happened to you? Carter stepped into the light, his face pale and smeared with blood. He clutched an old saddle blanket to his chest. It was an odd, awkward shape, as if it were wrapped around a tangle of kindling sticks. His friends jumped off their stools and hurried over at the sight of him. I'm fine, he said as he made his slow way into the common room. His eyes were wild around the edges, like a skittish horse. I'm fine. He dropped the bundled blanket onto the nearest table where it knocked hard against the wood, as if it were full of stones. His clothes were crisscrossed with long, straight cuts. His gray shirt hung in loose tatters except where it was stuck to his body, stained a dark, sullen red. Graham tried to ease him into the chair. Mother of God, sit down, Carter. What happened to you? Sit down. Carter shook his head stubbornly. I told you, I'm fine. I'm not hurt that bad. How many were there, Graham said. One, Carter said. But it's not what you think. God damn it. I told you, Carter. Old Cobb burst out with the sort of frightened anger only relatives and close friends can muster. I told you for months now. You can't go out alone. Not even as a Baden. It ain't safe.
Wait, what did you just say? A what?
A Baden?
A Baden?
Baden. B-A-E-D-N.
Is that like his name?
Baden. Yeah, it's capitalized, so it might be his name.
Okay. Continue.
Jake laid a hand on the old man's arm, quieting him. Just take a sit, Graham said, still trying to steer Carter into a chair. Let's get that shirt off you and get you cleaned up. This is where the gay stuff starts.
Oh, yeah.
Bow, bow. Ooh, chicka, chicka.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your dick just fell into my mouth.
Carter shook his head. I'm fine. I got cut up a little, but the blood is mostly Nellie's. It jumped on her. Killed her about 2 miles outside town past the old stone bridge. A moment of serious silence followed the news. The Smith's apprentice laid a sympathetic hand on Carter's shoulder. Damn, that's hard. She was gentle as a lamb, too. Never tried to bite or kick when you brought her in for shoes. Best horse in town. Damn, he trailed off. Damn. I don't know what to say. He looked around helplessly. Cobb finally managed to free himself from Jake. I told you, he repeated, shaking a finger in Carter's direction. There's folks out lately that would kill you for a pair of pennies, let alone a horse and a cart. What are you going to do now? Pull it yourself? There was a moment of uncomfortable quiet. Jake and Cobb glared at each other whilst the rest seemed at a loss for words, unsure of how to comfort their friend. The innkeeper moved carefully through the silence. Arms full, he stepped nimbly around Shep and began to arrange some items on the nearby table. A bowl of hot water, shears, some clean linen, a few glass bottles, needle and gut. This never would have happened if he'd listened to me in the first place, old Cobb muttered. Jake tried to quiet him, but Cobb brushed the younger man aside. I'm just telling the truth. It's a damn shame about Nellie, but he better listen now or he'll end up dead. You don't get lucky twice with those sort of men. Carter's mouth made a thin line. He reached out and pulled the edge of the bloody blanket. Whatever was inside flipped over once and snagged on the cloth. Carter tugged harder, and there was a clatter like a bag of flat river stones upended on the table. It was a spider as large as a wagon wheel, black as slate. The Smith's apprentice jumped backward and hit a table, knocking it over and almost falling to the ground himself.
Yeah.
Cobb's face went slack. Graham, Shep, and Jake made wordless, startled sounds and moved away, raising their hands to their faces. Carter took a step backwards that was almost like a nervous twitch. Silence filled the room like a cold sweat. The innkeeper frowned. They can't have made it this far west yet, he said softly. If not for the silence, it is unlikely anyone would have heard him, but they did. Their eyes pulled away from the thing on the table to stare mutely at the red-haired man. Jake found his voice first. You know what that is? The innkeeper's eyes were distant. Scrael, he said distractedly. I thought the mountains. Scrael, Jake broke in. Black and body of God coat. You've seen these things before? What? The red-haired innkeeper looked up sharply as if suddenly remembering where he was. Oh, no, of course not. Seeing that he was the only one within arm's length of the dark thing, he took a measured step away. Just something I heard. They stared at him. Do you remember the trader that came through about 2 span ago? They all nodded. Bastard tried to charge me 10 pennies for a half-pound of salt, Cobb said reflexively, repeating the complaint for perhaps the 100th time. Wish I'd bought some, Jake mumbled. Graham nodded a silent agreement. He was a filthy shim, Cobb spat. Fucking racist. Jesus Christ. He was a filthy shim, Cobb spat.
We love the Jewish people.
I don't know if that means Jew, but seeming to find comfort in the familiar words. I might pay 2 in a tight
Jew
time,
thing to do.
But 10 is robbery. Not if there are more of those on the road, Shep said darkly. All eyes went back to the thing on the table. He told me he'd heard of them over near Melcom, Coat said quickly, watching everyone's faces as they studied the thing on the table. I thought he was just trying to drive up his prices. What else did he say? Carter asked. The innkeeper looked thoughtful for a moment, then shrugged. I didn't get the whole story. He was only in town for a couple hours. I don't like spiders, the smith's apprentice said. He remained on the other side of a table some 15 feet away. Cover it up. It's not a spider, Jake said. It's got no eyes. It's got no mouth either, Carter pointed out. How does it eat? What does it eat? Shep said darkly. The innkeeper continued to eye the thing curiously. He leaned closer, stretching out a hand. Everyone edged even farther away from the table. Careful, Carter said. Its feet are sharp like knives. More like razors, Coates said. His long fingers brushed the thing's black, featureless body. It's smooth and hard, like pottery. Don't go messing with it, the smith's apprentice said. Moving carefully, the innkeeper took one of the long, smooth legs and tried to break it with both hands like a stick. Not pottery, he amended. He set it against the edge of the table and leaned with his weight against it. It broke with a sharp crack, more like stone. He looked up at Carter. How did it get all these cracks? He pointed to the thin fractures that crazed the smooth black surface of the body. Nellie fell on it, Carter said. It jumped out of a tree and started to climb all over her, cutting her up with its feet. It moved so fast. I didn't even know what was going on. Carter finally sank into the chair at Graham's urging. She got tangled in her harness and fell on it, broke some of its legs. Then it came after me, got on me, crawling all over. He crossed his arms in front of his bloody chest and shuddered. I managed to get it off me and stomped it hard as I could. Then it got on me again. He trailed off, his face ashen. The innkeeper nodded to himself as he continued to prod the thing. There's no blood, no organs. It's just gray inside. He poked it with a finger, like a mushroom. Great Tulu. Just leave it alone, the smith's apprentice begged. Sometimes spiders twitch after you kill them. Listen to yourselves, Cobb said scathingly. Spiders don't get as big as pigs. You know what this is. He looked around, making eye contact with each of them. It's a demon. They looked at the broken thing. Oh, come on now, said Jake, disagreeing mostly out of habit. It's not like... He made an inarticulate gesture. It can't just... Everyone knew what he was thinking. Certainly there were demons in the world, but they were like Telu's angels. They were like heroes and kings. They belonged in stories. They belonged out there. Tamerlane the Great called up fire and lightning to destroy demons. Telu broke them in his hands and sent them howling into the nameless void. Your childhood friend didn't stomp one to death on the road to Baden Brit. It was ridiculous. Coat ran his hand through his red hair, then broke the silence. There's one way to tell for sure, he said, reaching into his pocket. Iron or fire. He brought out a bulging leather purse. In the name of God, Graham pointed out. Demons fear 3 things: cold iron, clean fire, and the holy name of God. The innkeeper's mouth pressed itself into a straight line that was not quite a frown. Of course, he said as he emptied his purse onto the table, then fingered through the jumbled coins, heavy silver talents and thin silver bits, copper jots, broken halfpennies, and iron drabs. Does anyone have a shim? Just use a drab, Jake said. That's good iron. I don't want good iron, the innkeeper said. A drab has too much carbon in it. It's almost steel. He's right, the smith's apprentice said. Except if it's not carbon. You use coke to make steel. Coke and lime. The innkeeper nodded deferentially to the boy. You'd know best, young master. It's your business, after all. His long fingers finally found a shim in the pile of coins. He held it up. Here we are. What will it do, Jake asked. Iron kills demons, Cobb's voice was uncertain. But this one's already dead. It might not do anything. One way to find out. The innkeeper met each of their eyes briefly, as if measuring them. Then he turned purposefully back to the table, and they edged farther away. Cope pressed the iron shim to the black side of the creature, and there was a short, sharp crackling sound, like a pine log snapping in a hot fire. Everyone startled, then relaxed when the black thing remained motionless. Cobb and the others exchanged snaky smiles, like boys spooked by a ghost story. Their smiles went sour as the room filled with the sweet, acrid smell of rotting flowers and burning hair. The innkeeper pressed the shim under the table with a sharp click. Well, he said, brushing his hands against his apron, I guess that settles that. What do we do now?
So that's a fucking demon. This dude just brought it back? Like, he brought back the carcass of this thing?
Yeah.
He's like, hey, this giant razor-clawed spider, like, just attacked me and my horse, killed my fucking horse, and here's its body, guys.
Yeah. Do you think they would have believed him otherwise?
Fair, but still, what a dumbass. Like, what if it wasn't alive? Or what if it wasn't dead? And it's a demon, it just fucking, like, I don't know, regenerates and kills them all again. What an idiot.
What if? What if?
Good thing they know how to kill demons.
Right?
I don't feel like iron? How does iron kill a demon?
Listen, that's just the way it works in this world. I mean, everyone's free to build their world the way they want.
They are. I will say, every fantasy story ever has a character named Old Cobb.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhere there's an Old Cobb in the series.
I know an old Nan.
Yep, Old Nan. There's a, but like a Cobb. There's always a Cobb.
That's a very archetypical character.
Yeah.
Fantasy series are very big on archetypes.
So this thing is like a stone spider with razor
feet.
feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And lightning fast.
Yeah.
And the only way he managed to kill it is because the horse fell on it.
Which is like, I mean, that's dope. Like, that horse was a good horse, and it served till the end. You know,
saved his life.
What a good fucking horse.
Fucking die with soldier's honors. Hours later, the innkeeper stood in the doorway of the waystone and let his eyes relax to the darkness. Footprints of lamplight from the inn's windows fell across the dirt road and the doors of the smithy across the way. It was not a large road, nor well-traveled. It didn't seem to lead anywhere, as some roads do. The innkeeper drew a deep breath of autumn air and looked around restlessly, as if waiting for something to happen. He called himself Coat. He had chosen the name carefully when he came to this place. He had taken a new name for most of the usual reasons, and for a few unusual ones as well, not the least of which was the fact that names were important to him. Looking up, he saw 1,000 stars glittering in the deep velvet of a night with no moon. He knew them all, their stories and their names. He knew them in a familiar way, the way he knew his own hands. Looking down, Coat sighed without knowing it and went back inside. He locked the door and shuttered the wide windows of the inn, as if to distance himself from the stars and all their varied names. He swept the floor methodically, catching all the corners, and washed the tables and the bar, moving with a patient efficiency. At the end of an hour's work, the water in his bucket was still clean enough for a lady to wash her hands in. Finally, he pulled a stool behind the bar and began to polish the vast array of bottles nestled between the two huge barrels. He wasn't nearly as crisp and efficient about this chore as he had been with the others, and it soon became obvious the polishing was only an excuse to touch and hold. He even hummed a little, although he did not realize it, and would have stopped himself if he had known. As he turned the bottles in his long, graceful hands, the familiar motion eased a few tired lines from his face, making him seem younger, certainly not yet 30.
Is he getting off on this? It sounds like he's getting off on this.
Not even near 30. Young for an innkeeper. Young for a man with so many tired lines remaining on his face. Coat came to the top of the stairs and opened the door. His room was austere, almost monkish. There was a black stone fireplace in the center of the room, a pair of chairs, and a small deck. The only other furniture was a narrow bed with a large, dark chest at its foot. Nothing decorated the walls or covered the wooden floor. There were footsteps in the hall, and a young man stepped in the room carrying a bowl of stew that steamed and smelled of pepper. He was dark and charming, with a quick smile and cunning eyes. "You haven't been this late in a span of days," he said as he handed over the bowl. "There must have been good stories tonight, Rishi." Rishi was another of the innkeeper's names, a nickname almost. The sound of it tugged one corner of his mouth into a wry smile as he sank into the deep chair in front of the fire. "So what did you learn today, Bast?" "Today, master, I learned why great lovers have better eyesight than great scholars." "And why is that, Bast?" Coat asked, amusement touching the edge of his voice. Bast closed the door and returned to sit in the second chair, turning it to face his teacher in the fire. He moved with a strange delicacy and grace, as if he were close to dancing. "Well, Rishi, all the rich books are found inside where the light is bad. But lovely girls tend to be out in the sunshine and therefore much easier to study without risk of injuring one's eyes." Coat nodded. "But an exceptionally clever student could take a book outside, thus bettering himself without fear of lessening his much-loved faculty of sight." "I thought the same thing, Rishi, being, of course, an exceptionally clever student, of course. But when I found a place in the sun where I could read, a beautiful girl came along and kept me from doing anything of the sort," Bast finished with a flourish. Coat sighed. "Am I correct in assuming that you didn't manage to read any of Selim Tincture today?" Bast managed to look somewhat ashamed. Looking into the fire, Coat tried to assume a stern face and failed. "Ah, Bast. I hope she was lovely as a warm wind in the shade. I'm a bad teacher to say it, but I'm glad. I don't feel up to a long bout of lessons right now." There was a moment of silence. Carter was attacked by a Skraeling tonight. Bast's easy smile fell away like a cracked mask, leaving his face stricken and pale. "The Skrael?" He came halfway to his feet as if he would bolt from the room, then gave an embarrassed frown and forced himself back down into his chair. "How do you know? Who found his body?" "He's still alive, Bast. He brought it back. There was only one." "There's no such thing as one Skraeling," Bast said flatly. "You know that." "I know," Coat said. "The fact remains there was only one." "And he killed it?" Bast said. "It couldn't have been a Skraeling, maybe." "Bast, it was one of the Skrael. I saw it." Coat gave him a serious look. "He was lucky, that's all. Even so, he was badly hurt. 48 stitches. I used up nearly all my gut." Coat picked up the bowl of stew. "If anyone asks, tell them my grandfather was a caravan guard who taught me how to clean and stitch a wound. They were too shocked to ask about it tonight, but tomorrow some of them might get curious. I don't want that." He blew into his bowl, raising a cloud of steam around his face. "What did you do with the body?" "I didn't do anything with it," Coat said pointedly. "I am just an innkeeper. This sort of thing is quite beyond me. Rishi, you can't just let them muddle through this on their own." Coat sighed. "They took it to the priest. He did all the right things for all the wrong reasons." Bast opened his mouth, but Coat continued before he could say anything. "Yes, I made sure the pit was deep enough. Yes, I made sure there was rowan wood in the fire. Yes, I made sure it burned long and hot before they buried it. And yes, I made sure that no one kept a piece of it as a souvenir." He scowled, his eyebrows drawing together. "I'm not an idiot, you know." Bast visibly relaxed, settling back into his chair. I know you're not, Rishi. But I wouldn't trust half these people to piss leeward without help." He looked thoughtful for a moment. "I can't imagine why there was only one." "Maybe they died coming over the mountains," Coat suggested. "All but this one." "It's possible," Bast admitted reluctantly. "Maybe it was that storm from a couple days back," Coat pointed out. "A real wagon tipper, as we used to say back in the troop. All the wind and rain might have scattered one loose from the pack." "I like your first idea better, Rishi. Bass said uncomfortably. 3 or 4 Skrill would go through this town like a hot knife through butter. More like several hot knives through several dozen farmers, Bass said dryly. These people can't defend themselves. I bet there aren't 6 swords in this whole town. Not that swords would do much against the Skrill. There was a long moment of thoughtful silence. After a moment, Bass began to fidget. Any news? Coates shook his head. They didn't get to the news tonight. Carter disrupted things while they were still telling stories. That's something, I suppose. They'll be back tomorrow night. It'll give me something to do. Coat poked his spoon idly into the stew. I should have bought the Skraeling from Carter, he mused. He could have used the money for a new horse. People would have come from all over to see it. We could have had some business for a change. Bass gave him a speechless, horrified look. Coat made a pacifying gesture with a hand that held the spoon. I'm joking, Bass. He gave a weak smile. Still, it would have been nice. No, Rishi, it most certainly would not have been nice, Bass said emphatically. People would have come from all over to see it, he repeated derisively. Indeed. The business would have been nice, Coat clarified. Busyness would be nice. He jabbed his spoon into the stew again. Anything would be nice. They sat for a long moment, Coat scowling down into the bowl of stew in his hands, his eyes far away. It must be awful for you here, Bast, he said at last. You must be numb with boredom. Bast shrugged. There are a few young wives in town, a scattering of daughters. He grinned like a child. I tend to make my own fun. That's good, Bast. There was another silence. Coat took another spoonful, chewed, swallowed. They thought it was a demon, you know. Bast shrugged. It might as well be, Rishi. It's probably the best thing for them to think. I know. I encourage them, in fact. But you know what that means. He met Bass' eyes. The blacksmith is going to be doing a brisk business in the next couple days. Bass' expression went carefully blank. Oh, Coat nodded. I won't blame you if you want to leave, Bast. You have better places to be than this. Bass' expression was shocked. I couldn't leave, Rishi. He opened and closed his mouth a few times at a loss for words. Who else would teach me? Coat grinned, and for a moment his face showed how truly young he was. Behind the weary lines and the placid innkeeper's expression, he looked no older than his dark-haired companion. Who indeed? He gestured toward the door with a spoon. Go do your reading then, or bother someone's daughter. I'm sure you have better things to do than watch me eat. Actually, be gone, demon, Coat said, switching to a thickly accented Temic through half of a mouthful of stew. Tihus antusa iha. Bass burst into startled laughter and made an obscene gesture with one hand. Coat swallowed and changed languages. Aroi ti denalian. Oh, come now, Bass reproached, his smile falling away. That's just insulting. By earth and stone, I abjure you. Coat dipped his fingers into the cup by his side and flicked droplets casually in Bass' direction. Glamour be banished. With cider? Bass managed to look amused and annoyed at the same time as he dubbed a bead of liquid from the front of his shirt. This better not stain. Coat took another bite of his dinner. Go soak it. If the situation becomes desperate, I recommend you avail yourself of the numerous solvent formulae extant in the Selim tincture. Chapter 13, I believe. Fine. Bass stood and walked to the door, stepping with a strange casual grace. Call if you need anything. He closed the door behind himself. Coat ate slowly, mopping up the last of his stew with a piece of bread. He looked out the window as he ate, or tried to, as the lamplight turned its surface mirror-like against the dark behind it. His eyes wandered the room restlessly. The fireplace was made of the same black rock as the one downstairs. It stood in the center of the room, a minor feat of engineering of which Coat was rather proud. The bed was small, little more than a cot, and if you were to touch it, you would find the mattress almost non-existent. A skilled observer might notice that there was something his gaze avoided, the same way you avoid meeting the eye of an old lover at a formal dinner, or that of an old enemy sitting across the room in a crowded alehouse late at night. Coat tried to relax, failed, fidgeted, sighed, shifted in his seat, and without willing it, his eyes fell on the chest at the foot of his bed. It was made of roa, a rare, heavy wood, dark as coal and smooth as polished glass. Prized by perfumers and alchemists, a piece the size of your thumb was easily worth gold. To have a chest made of it went far beyond extravagance. The chest was sealed 3 times. It had a lock of iron, a lock of copper, and a lock that could not be seen. Tonight, the wood filled the room with an almost imperceptible aroma of citrus and quenching iron. When Quote's eyes fell on the chest, they did not dart quickly away. They did not slide slyly to the side as if he were to pretend it wasn't there at all. But in a moment of looking, his face regained all the lines the simple pleasures of the day had slowly smoothed away. The comfort of his bottles and his books was erased in a second, leaving nothing behind his eyes but emptiness and ache. For a moment, fierce longing and regret warred across his face. Then they were gone, replaced by the weary face of an innkeeper, a man who called himself Coat. He sighed again without knowing it and pushed himself to his feet. It was a long time before he walked past the chest of bed. Once in bed, it was a long time before he slept.
I feel you, Coat.
Fucking Coat. Oh, it's only 2 pages left. As Coat had guessed, they came back to the Waystone the next night for dinner and drinks. There were a few half-hearted attempts at stories, but they died out quickly. No one was really in the mood. So it was still early in the evening when the discussion turned to matters of great import. They chewed over the rumors that had come into town, mostly of them troubling. The penitent king was having a difficult time with the rebels in Reykjavik. This caused some concern, but only in a general way. Reykjavik was a long way off, and even Cobb, the most worldly of them, would be hard-pressed to find it on a map. They discussed the war on their own terms. Cobb predicted a 3rd levy tax after the harvests were in. No one argued, though they hadn't been a 3 bleeder year in a living memory. Jake guessed the harvest would be good enough so the 3rd levy wouldn't break most families, except the Bentleys, who were on hard times anyway, and the Orissons, whose sheep kept disappearing, and Crazy Martin, who had planted all barley this year. Every farmer with half a brain had planted beans. That was one good thing about all the fighting. Soldiers ate beans, and prices would be high. After a few more drinks, deeper concerns were voiced. Deserters, soldiers, and other opportunists were thick on the roads, making even short trips risky. The roads were always bad, of course, but in the same way that winter was always cold. You complained, took sensible precautions, you got on with business of living your life. But this was different. Over the last 2 months, the roads had become so bad that people had stopped complaining. The last caravan had 2 wagons and 4 guards. The merchant had been asking 10 pennies for a half a pound of salt, 15 for a loaf of sugar. He didn't have any pepper or cinnamon or chocolate. He did have 1 small sack of coffee, but he wanted 2 silver talents for it. At first, people had laughed at his prices. Then, when he held firm, folk had spat and cursed at him. That had been 2 span ago, 22 days. There had not been another serious trader since, even though this was the season for it. So despite the 3rd levy tax looming large in everyone's mind, people were looking in their purses and wishing they'd bought just a little something, just in case the snow came early. No one spoke of the previous night, of the thing they had burned and buried. Other folk were talking, of course. The town was alive with gossip. Carter's wounds ensured that the stories were taken half seriously, but not much more than half. The word demon was being spoken, but it was with smiles half hidden behind raised hands. Only the 6 friends had seen the thing before it was burned. One of them had been wounded, and the others had been drinking. The priest had seen it too, but it was his job to see demons. Demons were good for his business. The innkeeper had seen it too, apparently, but he wasn't from around here. He couldn't know the truth that was so apparent to everyone born and raised in this little town. Stories were told here, but they happened somewhere else. This was not a place for demons. Besides, things were bad enough without borrowing trouble. Cobb and the rest knew there was no sense talking about it. Trying to convince folk would only make them a laughingstock like Crazy Martin, who had been trying to dig a well inside his own house for years now. Still, each of them bought a piece of cold wrought iron from the smith, heavy as they could swing, and none of them said what they were thinking. Instead, they complained that the roads were bad and getting worse. They talked about merchants and deserters and levies, and not enough salt to last the winter. They reminisced that 3 years ago, no one would have even thought of locking their doors at night, let alone barring them. The conversation took a downward turn from there, and even though none of them said what they were thinking, the evening ended on a grim note. Most evenings did these days, times being what they were.
Damn. That's a hard first chapter. So, I mean, you feel that Cott is more than an innkeeper right away, I think.
Yeah.
And so he's like definitely in some type of higher secret order with his little companion.
I think the next chapter, I don't know if you find out who he really is until like in the next chapter he does some shit, and I think maybe in the third chapter what this ends up being is
No spoilers.
it's not even okay. I won't even tell you anything.
No.
Okay.
I want to sit here and kind of guess through this because this
Okay.
is like, I like listening to this unfold. So these are creatures. They're definitely not demons. And these are like these guys are like fucking like demon hunters, but they're not demon hunters. They're like just opposing this other force, I feel.
They're certainly not fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. They certainly realize what a bad thing it is for these things to be around.
Yeah.
And are in fact scared of them.
And these things just seem like kind of the tip of an iceberg,
Right.
Of like more malevolent
Right.
forces enacting
Right.
in this world. So this is gonna be a fun one. I'm excited.
It's one of my favorite books ever.
I'm pretty excited for this.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was real good. So we got what was it, Baskin, and we got Cott, who's not Cott.
Bast
Bast
is his student.
his student.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we got not Cott. What does Bast call him?
Calls him Rishi.
Rishi,
Yeah.
which is like probably like teacher. Is a teacher.
I don't remember exactly what it means, but it's probably like teacher or
Yeah.
master. I mean, as you find out more about Cott, you find out
I love that
he's got a lot of names.
I love that Bast's a fucking perv. Like,
Yeah.
right off the bat, he's a stalker.
He's a young dude.
He's a stalker.
He's a
is
young
what he
dude.
did. Young dudes don't stalk people like
He's not
that.
stalking
He's
people.
Stalking.
He said he was having a good time. He was hanging out.
Come on, dude.
He was carousing.
Like, you can't read your book because there's a girl there. Like,
He was making excuses. It was playful banter between him and his master. He's being cute. That's his thing. He's cute.
He's cute.
Yeah, he's a ladies' man. Find out more about him later.
I like this.
But he's a city. He's a city folk.
This is a good pick.
Yeah, no, I was gonna pick something else, but I couldn't find it, so
This is a
I
good
just
pick.
found this.
So yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think of the characters so far. What you think's gonna happen. And don't fucking spoil us. Don't spoil me in the comments because I don't want to know what happens. I want to hear this book unfold.
He wants to hear it unfold.
This is good shit. I want to make my guesses. I want to see if I'm right. I want to see if my powers of deduction are as good as I think they are.
I know. And what's so funny is just like I know what's like.
That's perfect.
It's getting ready to take just a completely different like
turn
away from what is happening right now.
Okay.
So
I'm excited. I'm excited.
This is the beginning of the book is the setup of, the character of the barkeep in hiding.
Okay.
Who's more than he says he is, and it unfolds a little more. You see a little more of who he is, and then the story kind of takes a different narrative turn. So
interesting.
It's called the King Killer Chronicles because what it ends up being is this man chronicling his life.
Okay.
So
okay. I'm pretty excited. Name of the Wind.
Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss.
Rothfuss.
We can't make any money anymore because of our trademark infringement that we don't know about. That's not really a thing.
No, honestly, I'll put a link to the book on Amazon in the comments.
Yeah,
if
you guys
wanna pick up a
you should
copy.
actually read this book. It's a fantastic
Pick yourself
book.
up a copy or listen to it on Audible because they're better than us. But we're gonna keep going through it, and we're also gonna jump back to Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, which is always fun because the Norse gods don't give a fuck.
And if you're just curious about why my beard looks so amazing, go to thebeardstruggle.com and put in code MCWalker for 15% off your order today.
Get it done. We love you, everybody.
Bye.
Meat sweats, motherfucking meat sweats, meat sweats.